Excuse me, but no, I'm not doing this. I'm not sitting next to him. Sloane Whitaker shoved her handbag onto the empty seat beside her and stared up at Adrian Cross. Sir, you need to find another seat. Adrian stood quietly in the aisle. This is my assigned seat. You can check the boarding pass. Sloane let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Seriously, first class dressed like that. Adrian didn't move. Please move your bag. Her smile disappeared. Don't tell me what to do. I paid a fortune for this seat, and I'm not spending the entire flight trapped beside someone who makes me uncomfortable. The cabin slowly went silent. Adrian's voice remained calm. I'm only asking you to clear the seat I paid for. Sloane leaned toward him and raised her middle finger inches from his face. Then ask someone else, because you're not sitting here. Adrian didn't flinch. Sloane had no idea that the man she was humiliating owned 75% of the company that paid her salary. Before we go any further, tell us where in the world you're watching from, and make sure you subscribe, because the next story is one you won't want to miss. Adrian Cross stepped through the first-class cabin door, wearing a dark green button-down shirt that had wrinkled during the drive to Los Angeles International Airport. A small black duffel bag hung loosely from his shoulder. He moved down the narrow aisle with quiet purpose, checking each seat number against the boarding pass in his hand. The cabin carried the familiar energy of passengers preparing for departure. People settled into wide leather seats, adjusted pillows, stored bags, and ordered drinks. Adrian's eyes found his row. The window seat was occupied by a woman in an expensive red dress beneath a designer blazer. Her blonde hair had been styled perfectly, and diamond earrings caught the overhead light every time she moved. Sloane Whitaker looked up from her phone as Adrian approached. Her blue eyes traveled over him in a quick, dismissive sweep. She noticed the casual shirt, the worn duffel bag, and the calm patience in his face. Her back stiffened. Adrian stopped beside the row and checked his boarding pass again. Excuse me, he said quietly. I believe I'm in seat 3B. Sloane's mouth opened slightly. She stared at him as though he had spoken in a language she couldn't understand. Around them, other passengers continued talking, unaware that the mood in the row had begun to change. No, Sloane said, loud enough to rise above the cabin noise. Absolutely not. Adrian blinked. I'm sorry? Camille, Sloane called sharply toward the front of the cabin. Camille, I need you right now. Flight attendant, Camille Brooks hurried over with her professional smile in place. She was a petite woman with warm eyes and neatly braided hair pulled back from her face. Yes, Miss Whitaker, how can I help? Sloane pointed directly at Adrian. This man is trying to sit beside me. I refuse. I paid full price for first class, and I will not be made uncomfortable. Camille's smile wavered. She looked from Sloane to Adrian as confusion entered her expression. Sir, may I see your boarding pass? Adrian handed it to her without a word. Camille examined it carefully, checked the seat number, and looked up with an apologetic expression. You're correct, sir. Seat 3B belongs to you. There you are, Adrian said gently. There's no mistake. Sloane's face flushed. There has to be a mistake. Someone like him doesn't belong in first class. Check it again. Passengers in nearby rows began turning their heads. Conversations faded. An uncomfortable silence spread through the cabin. Adrian remained still. His jaw tightened slightly, but his voice stayed even. Someone like me? Don't pretend you don't understand, Sloane snapped. You know exactly what I mean. Look at you. That wrinkled shirt, that cheap bag. You probably used reward points or benefited from some kind of upgrade error. Camille stepped closer and lowered her voice. Miss Whitaker, please. The gentleman has a valid boarding pass for that seat. Perhaps we could find another solution. No, Sloane's voice carried through the entire cabin. I will not sit next to him. Find him somewhere else, or I'm filing a complaint against this entire crew. Adrian's hands remained at his sides. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show anger. Still, something flickered behind his eyes. He had faced this kind of treatment before. The assumptions, the judgment, the quiet humiliation delivered by people who believed appearance gave them permission to decide another person's worth. Ma'am, Camille said carefully, I understand that you're upset, but there is no reason for concern. Concern? Sloane stood abruptly, the fabric of her red dress brushing the seat. I'm disgusted. I pay thousands of dollars for these flights, and now you let anyone wander into first class. What's next? Are you going to start handing these seats to people from the street? Other passengers stared openly. Several raised their phones. The cabin became so quiet that the hum of the air conditioning seemed unusually loud. Adrian stood in the aisle while Camille held his boarding pass in trembling fingers. His eyes stayed fixed on Sloane with a calm, unwavering focus. Sloane pointed at the empty leather seat beside her. I is not sitting there. The silence stretched tight enough to break. Passengers twisted in their seats and more phones appeared as the tension thickened. Sloane's eyes narrowed. The color in her cheeks deepened and spread down her neck. She looked Adrian up and down with open disgust, as though every detail of his appearance were evidence against him. Look at him, she said. That wrinkled shirt probably came from a bargain store. Those shoes look like they've crossed every rough neighborhood in Los Angeles. And that sad little bag. What do you even have in there? Your entire life? Adrian's expression didn't change. He didn't defend himself. He didn't take the bait. His composure only seemed to make her angrier. You probably saved for months to afford this ticket, she continued. Or maybe somebody gave it to you. Maybe it came from a charity program, because there is no way someone like you earned the right to sit beside someone like me. A businessman across the aisle took out his phone and began recording. The small red light appeared on the screen as he captured every word. Camille tried again, her professional training battling the discomfort in her face. Miss Whitaker, please lower your voice. The other passengers are becoming concerned. The other passengers. Sloane spun toward her. The other passengers don't want to sit next to him either. Look around. Nobody wants to be near people who don't belong here. This is first class, not a bus station. Adrian finally spoke. I'm not going anywhere, ma'am. This is my seat. Those simple words pushed Sloane over the edge. Her face tightened with fury. She stepped closer, invading his space. Her expensive perfume filled the narrow aisle, but it couldn't hide the bitterness in her voice. Your seat? You don't get seats like this. You don't get to sit beside people like me. She looked him over once more. For all I know, you're some criminal who stumbled into money. That's the only way someone like you could afford first class. Passengers gasped. A woman in the row ahead covered her mouth. The businessman continued recording, his face hard with disapproval, not toward Adrian, but toward Sloane's growing cruelty. Adrian kept his hands at his sides. His breathing remained steady, though his jaw tightened with each insult. I'm calling security, Sloane declared as she pulled out her phone. I'm having you removed from this aircraft. Then I'm calling the airline and filing complaints against every crew member who allowed this to happen. She waved the phone near his face. You think you can walk onto a plane and sit wherever you want? You think you're entitled to the same treatment as people who actually paid? You're wrong. Then she did something that froze the entire cabin. Sloane lifted her right hand directly in front of Adrian's face. She extended her middle finger and held it inches from his nose, her expression filled with spiteful satisfaction. This is what I think of you and people like you. The gasp from the passengers was immediate. Someone whispered in shock. The businessman's phone recorded everything while Sloane held the gesture in place. Adrian looked at her hand, then slowly met her eyes. He said nothing. His silence unsettled her more than an argument ever could. Camille stepped forward quickly. Her face had gone pale. She placed herself between them, and her hands shook slightly. Ma'am, that is completely inappropriate. Please return to your seat immediately. Sloane lowered her hand and looked around at the staring passengers and raised phones. Instead of shame, she wore a triumphant smirk, as though all the attention proved she had won. There, she said with satisfaction. Now everyone understands what we're dealing with. Camille turned toward Adrian. Her eyes held apology and embarrassment. Her voice became gentle and respectful. Sir, I'm deeply sorry about this. Would you allow me to move you to one of our more private seats near the front? It's quieter there, and you'll have more room. Adrian nodded once. His dignity remained intact, even after everything he had been forced to endure. Camille escorted him toward the front of the aircraft. Sloane settled into her window seat with a smirk, convinced that she had claimed some important victory. Once the aircraft reached cruising altitude, the cabin lights dimmed to a soft amber glow. Sloane sat by the window with a glass of champagne, still warmed by her earlier satisfaction. She told herself she had handled the situation perfectly. In her mind, some people needed to be reminded of their place. She sipped her drink and gazed at the endless clouds below, feeling powerful and vindicated. The flight attendants moved quietly through the cabin, their earlier tension replaced by practiced calm. Sloane barely noticed them. Her thoughts had already shifted to an important business meeting waiting for her in New York. A few rows behind her, two men in expensive suits spoke in low voices. At first, Sloane paid no attention. She was too absorbed in her own plans to care about someone else's conversation. Then certain words reached her. "The shareholder meeting is going to be explosive," one of the men said. Cross called it with almost no notice. He has never done that before. Sloane's attention sharpened. She knew that name. Everyone at Crestwell International knew it, even though very few employees had ever seen the man behind it. Adrian Cross owned 75% of the company, the second executive said. When he wants something done, it gets done. No debate, no delay. Sloane shifted in her seat, pretending to adjust her position while listening more closely. The men clearly worked for Crestwell. She recognized one of them as Grant Ellis from the finance division. The other was unfamiliar, but his watch, posture, and quiet confidence suggested senior management. "I heard he's personally reviewing personnel files," Grant continued. "Disciplinary actions, complaints, settlements, everything that was buried or closed." The other executive moved uneasily. "That's what concerns me. Cross usually stays away from daily operations. If he's suddenly examining personnel matters himself, someone is about to face serious consequences." A chill moved through Sloane's body. Personnel files, complaints, settlements. She had survived several internal disputes during her career. In her mind, they were caused by employees who couldn't handle strong leadership, people who mistook firmness for unfairness. Those matters had been handled quietly and professionally, then pushed out of sight where she believed they belonged. "The strangest part," Grant continued, "is that most employees have never seen him. He travels constantly, keeps a low profile, dresses like an ordinary person, and flies commercially instead of using the company aircraft. You could sit beside Adrian Cross on a plane and never realize who he was." Sloane's champagne glass stopped halfway to her lips. A terrible understanding crept through her like cold water. The second executive lowered his voice. "Speaking of him, isn't that Mr. Cross sitting up front?" He nodded discreetly toward the more private seats near the front of the cabin. Sloane followed his gaze, and the world seemed to tilt beneath her. There he was, sitting calmly by the window, looking at the clouds with the same composed expression he had worn during her attack. The man she had humiliated, the man whose face she had filled with insults, the man she had declared unworthy of first class. Adrian Cross, the majority owner of Crestwell International, the man who controlled the company where she had built her career, and who now held the power to examine every decision she had ever made. The glass slipped from her fingers. Champagne spilled across the expensive red fabric of her dress. She barely noticed. Her mind replayed every cruel word, every accusation, every degrading gesture, the raised finger inches from his face, the passengers recording, Camille standing between them in shock. The blood drained from Sloane's face as the full weight of her mistake struck her. She had to fix it. She had to apologize, explain, and make him understand that it had all been a misunderstanding. She rose on unsteady legs and hurried toward the front of the cabin. Her heart beat so hard that she could hear it beneath the steady sound of the engines. Passengers looked up as she passed. Some recognized her from the earlier confrontation. Adrian didn't turn as she approached. He continued watching the clouds, peaceful and apparently untouched by the chaos she had caused. Sloane stopped beside him and cleared her throat. He turned with mild curiosity. "Mr. Cross," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had no idea who you were. I'm terribly sorry about what happened. It was all a misunderstanding." Adrian studied her for a long moment. His dark eyes were calm and measuring. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and controlled, yet something in it made her stomach drop. "Miss Whitaker, I recognized you the moment you entered this plane." Sloane's knees nearly gave way. The certainty in his tone told her everything. This had not been a random encounter to him. He had known who she was. "You knew," she whispered. "You knew who I was when you showed me exactly who you are," Adrian said. He shifted in his seat and faced her fully. Passengers nearby tried not to stare, but Sloane could feel their attention. "Yes, Miss Whitaker. I knew exactly who you were. I recently reopened employee files that had been buried in our corporate archives. Complaints against you stretching across years, intimidation, biased promotion decisions, retaliation against employees who dared to speak honestly." Sloane's mouth went dry. She glanced around and leaned closer. Those complaints were settled. They were legally resolved. There was never any admission of wrongdoing. Adrian's expression remained unchanged. "A settlement is not the same as justice." "I don't know what you think you're doing," Sloane whispered, panic sharpening her voice. "But I have excellent lawyers." This conversation could be considered harassment of a senior employee. Near the galley, Camille was checking passenger requests when fragments of the conversation reached her. She had tried to give them privacy, but Sloane's tone made her pause. Camille began organizing supplies while listening more carefully. Adrian gave a soft laugh without humor. "Are you threatening me, Miss Whitaker? On a plane full of witnesses, after what just happened in front of several cameras?" "I'm protecting myself from whatever personal vendetta you're pursuing," Sloane replied, though her voice had lost its earlier force. "One incident does not justify targeting a senior executive." "One incident?" Adrian raised his eyebrows slightly. What happened in this cabin wasn't an isolated incident. It was confirmation. Camille felt a chill move through her. The deliberate way Adrian spoke, the fear growing in Sloane's voice, and the references to buried files made it clear that this was much larger than a dispute over a seat. "Confirmation of what?" Sloane demanded, though she seemed afraid of the answer. Adrian leaned back, his composure unbroken. "Confirmation that the complaints filed against you were telling the truth. You create hostile environments wherever you go. You believe your position gives you the right to judge people by their appearance, their background, and the power you think they possess." "You can't prove that," Sloane said. "Those files are sealed. Those cases are closed. Files can be unsealed. Cases can be reopened when new evidence appears." Adrian's voice lowered. "But you're not my greatest concern." Sloane blinked. "What do you mean?" "The people who protected you. The executives who buried those complaints. The managers who enabled your behavior year after year. They turned our company into a place where employees stay silent because telling the truth feels more dangerous than enduring mistreatment." Camille thought about every crew member she had heard whisper about difficult passengers, every report that vanished, and every employee who learned to keep their head down instead of speaking openly. "I don't understand," Sloane said. "Conrad has always supported me." "Conrad Hale supports whatever keeps the company profitable and free of scandal," Adrian interrupted. "Until now." As the aircraft began descending toward New York, Sloane gripped the back of his seat. Her knuckles whitened against the leather. "What are you going to do?" Adrian turned back toward the window and watched the city lights slowly rise beneath them. His reply was so quiet that Camille had to strain to hear it. "You confirmed everything." The arrival gate at John Fitzgerald Kennedy International Airport was filled with the usual confusion of passengers leaving a long flight. People moved through the jet bridge with carry-on bags, checking phones that had been unavailable in the air. Yet something felt different. Whispered conversations carried an uneasy charge. Several passengers held their screens up, comparing faces and replaying the video that had already begun spreading. Sloane moved through the crowd like someone being hunted. Her designer heels struck the terminal floor in quick, uneven steps. Her red blazer was wrinkled from nervous movement. She kept looking over her shoulder for Adrian, for passengers from the flight, or for anyone who might recognize her. Her phone vibrated again and again. Social media alerts, news notifications, messages from colleagues. Each one tightened the knot in her stomach. She slipped into an empty gate area and called Conrad Hale with shaking fingers. "Conrad, thank God you answered." "Sloane." His voice was crisp and controlled, the voice of a man accustomed to containing crises. "I've been watching this develop. It's everywhere, isn't it? The video, the headlines, all of it. Several major platforms are carrying it," Conrad said. "News organizations have picked it up. Aviation sites are calling it one of the worst first-class confrontations they've seen." Sloane closed her eyes. "Conrad, you need to understand something. The man beside me was—" "I know exactly who he was," Conrad interrupted. "That's why you will not say another word to anyone until you reach headquarters. No statements, No apologies, no posts, nothing. People are calling me prejudiced. They're demanding that I be fired. The company's phones must be overwhelmed. The company will survive this. We've survived difficult publicity before. His tone became more commanding. Come directly to headquarters. Use the private garage entrance. We'll decide how to contain the damage once you're here. Back at the gate, Adrian remained seated while passengers continued filing out. His duffel bag rested beside him. He watched Sloane hurry away without expression. Camille approached hesitantly. She had removed her service jacket, but her name tag still read Brooks. "Mr. Cross, you wanted to speak with me?" Adrian looked up. His face was kind but serious. "I need an official incident report, Miss Brooks. Everything you witnessed, everything you heard, and every action you took from your professional perspective." Camille twisted her hands together. "Sir, I'm not sure I should become involved in whatever this is turning into. I have a job to protect. I have a career." "I understand," Adrian said gently. "But sometimes protecting our work begins with protecting the truth. What if Crestwell retaliates against me? What if they say I mishandled the confrontation? What if they claim I should have done more?" Adrian studied her face. "Miss Brooks, you've spent a long career handling difficult passengers, managing conflict, and keeping people safe in the air. You know the difference between right and wrong better than most people ever will. What happened in that cabin wasn't merely a passenger service problem. It revealed something much deeper." Camille looked toward the gate where Sloane had disappeared. She remembered the insults, the raised finger, and the way Sloane had treated another person, as though he were worthless based only on how he looked. "I'll write the report," she said at last. "Everything I saw, everything I heard." Sloane reached baggage claim while clutching her phone. The automatic doors opened onto the traffic outside. Taxis honked, buses moved past, and streams of travelers headed toward the curb. Then she saw the cameras. A cluster of reporters and photographers stood near the taxi area, scanning arriving passengers. "Sloane Whitaker," a woman called. "Can you comment on the viral video from your flight?" Sloane's blood seemed to turn cold. They had already identified her face, her name, and her employer. "Miss Whitaker," another reporter called. "Do you regret your behavior? Will Crestwell International take disciplinary action?" She held her phone closer and tried to disappear into the crowd, but camera flashes began firing around her. A black sedan reached the curb. The rear door opened, and Sloane rushed inside without looking back. As the car pulled away, her phone displayed a message from Conrad. "We protect ourselves first." Sloane stared at the words while the city lights blurred beyond the window. The message felt less like comfort and more like a warning. The executive floor of Crestwell International was tense with nervous energy. Glass conference rooms lined the hall, offering wide views of the city, but no one was interested in the skyline. Conrad Hale stood at the head of the largest conference room. His silver hair was perfectly arranged despite the chaos around him. His navy suit remained pressed, and his tie was straight, but his jaw carried the strain of a man watching his carefully built world begin to crack. "Close the door," Conrad ordered as the final executive entered. Senior vice presidents filled the leather chairs around the polished table. The legal team sat near the far end with tablets, phones, and documents spread before them. Sloane occupied the chair closest to Conrad. She had changed into a black business suit, but makeup couldn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes. Her fingers trembled when she reached for a glass of water. "All right," Conrad began. "We have a situation that requires immediate control. The incident on the flight has gone viral. Our stock has already fallen. The board is asking questions." Dana Holloway, the leader of the legal team, spoke first. "We've reviewed the footage circulating online. From a liability perspective, we can frame this as a misunderstanding between two passengers that escalated unnecessarily." "Exactly," Conrad said. Sloane was exhausted and traveling after a difficult week. The seating arrangement was confusing. Emotions rose, as they sometimes do on airplanes. "We issue a statement emphasizing our commitment to respect and inclusion. Then we move forward." Sloane nodded quickly. "It was a misunderstanding. I was tired. I'd been working relentlessly. I wasn't thinking clearly. Anyone could have." "Anyone could have what?" The voice came from the conference room entrance. Every head turned. Adrian Cross stood in the doorway, still wearing the simple green shirt and carrying his worn duffel bag. He looked calm, almost casual, yet his presence filled the room like pressure gathering before a storm. "Mr. Cross," Conrad said, shifting into forced politeness. "I wasn't expecting you." "I'm sure you weren't." Adrian stepped into the room and closed the door. "Please continue. You were explaining how anyone could have done what Miss Whitaker did." The room went silent. Sloane stared at the table, unable to meet his eyes. The other executives looked anywhere except at the man who controlled their professional futures. "Adrian," Conrad said, trying to recover his authority. "Emotions are high after what happened, but we need to consider the larger picture. Crestwell employs 40,000 people. We have shareholders, investors, and contracts worth billions of dollars. One unfortunate moment should not—" "One unfortunate moment?" Adrian's voice remained quiet, but several people leaned back. "Is that what we're calling it?" He moved to the empty chair opposite Conrad. "I want an independent ethics investigation and a complete audit of every discrimination complaint filed across recent years. External investigators, not our internal legal department." Dana cleared her throat. "Mr. Cross, with respect, launching an investigation now would generate even more negative attention. It could look as though we're admitting wrongdoing. Maybe because we are." Conrad stood and spread his hands in a practiced gesture of reason. "Adrian, I understand that you're upset. What happened on the plane was inappropriate, and Sloane understands that. But destroying one of our most senior executives over a single event isn't justice. It's revenge." Sloane finally looked up. Carefully formed tears appeared in her eyes. "Mr. Cross, I made a mistake. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. I've given a major part of my life to this company. I've built programs, mentored employees, and delivered results. I don't deserve to lose my entire career because I had one terrible day." Adrian studied her face. "Miss Whitaker, how many employees have you dismissed in recent years?" "I don't see how that's relevant." 37, Adrian answered. "I've reviewed the records. 37 people lost their jobs under your direct supervision. 28 were people of color. Would you like to explain that pattern?" The room seemed to grow colder. Sloane opened her mouth, but no sound came. Conrad stepped forward, his diplomatic expression beginning to crack. "Those were performance-based decisions. We have documentation for every dismissal. Suggesting otherwise is what?" Adrian asked as he rose slowly. "Uncomfortable? Expensive? Dangerous to the image you've spent years protecting?" He looked around the table at faces that could no longer meet his gaze. "Let me explain something. Hiding abuse doesn't make it disappear. It allows it to grow. It spreads through a workplace until silence becomes normal and fear becomes policy. When the truth finally comes out, and it always does, the damage is far greater than it would have been if people had acted honestly from the beginning." Conrad's face reddened. "You're talking about destroying careers, Adrian. You're talking about damaging a company your own father helped build." "My father built this company to create opportunities, not to protect people who destroy them." Adrian's voice carried a finality that made several executives shift in their chairs. The room fell into tense silence. Beyond the glass walls, employees moved through the hallway without knowing that the future of their company was being decided only a few feet away. Conrad walked toward the window with his back to the room. When he turned, the polished mask of diplomacy had disappeared. Something colder had taken its place. "Sloane," he said quietly, "you and I need to speak in private." The borrowed office felt smaller than it should have. Adrian sat behind a mahogany desk that belonged to a middle-level executive who had cleared the room for him. Papers covered nearly every surface, coffee cups balanced beside file folders. Harsh overhead light cast shadows across documents that told stories of damaged careers and buried complaints. Marissa Grant sat across from him with reading glasses resting low on her nose. She turned through another personnel file with the concentration of someone who had spent much of her career studying corporate wrongdoing. Her dark hair was pulled into a neat bun, and the creases in her blazer revealed how long she had been working. "This pattern reaches back for years," she said without looking up. "The same divisions, the same complaints, the same outcomes." She dropped another folder onto the growing pile between them. Nothing was corrected. Nothing was acknowledged. Adrian rubbed his temples. The evidence was worse than he had imagined. Complaint after complaint had been buried beneath legal settlements and confidentiality agreements. Some names were familiar. He remembered faces from company gatherings, talented people who had suddenly vanished from the organization without explanation. His phone vibrated with another email. "More people are reaching out," Marissa said. "The video has made them believe someone might finally listen." Adrian opened the message. It came from Lena Park, a former accounting supervisor. She had seen what happened on the plane and wanted to share her own experience with Sloan, retaliation, and fear. Then the phone rang. Adrian hesitated before answering. "Adrian Cross." "Mr. Cross?" The voice was unsteady. "This is Alicia Morgan. I used to work for Crestwell International. I saw the video from the plane, and I need to speak with you." Marissa looked up immediately and silently repeated the name. "Alicia Morgan." Adrian nodded. He remembered the file. "Miss Morgan, of course. How can I help you?" "She destroyed me." The words came out in a rush, as though Alicia had been holding them inside for far too long. "Sloan Whitaker destroyed my life, and everyone around her watched it happen." Adrian placed the call on speaker. Marissa leaned forward with a pen ready. "I was moving up in business development," Alicia continued. "My reviews were strong. I earned promotions. I thought I had a future there. Then I reported her." "Reported what?" Adrian asked gently. "She was openly blocking promotions for black employees. In meetings, she would say we needed to think about appearances, or that certain clients preferred a particular image. When I documented those comments and sent them to Human Resources, she came after me." Marissa wrote quickly. Adrian felt his chest tighten. "First, my projects were reassigned," Alicia said. "Then my team was restructured. Suddenly, every report I submitted had quality problems. Every meeting I led became proof that I had communication issues. Before long, I was placed on a performance improvement plan." "Did Human Resources investigate your complaint?" Marissa asked. Alicia gave a bitter laugh. "They told me I was being too sensitive and needed to change my perspective. They said Sloan was simply demanding excellence. When I refused to withdraw the complaint, they began building a case against me." Adrian's hands closed into fists. The records in front of him supported every word. "I eventually lost my job," Alicia continued. "They said I had an attitude problem and failed to meet performance standards. They challenged my unemployment claim and refused to provide a useful reference. I had to take part-time retail work just to keep my apartment." "What happened to your health coverage?" Marissa asked. "It disappeared with the job. I couldn't afford the medicine I needed. I had to choose between rent and medical appointments." Alicia's voice broke. "I nearly lost everything because I tried to do the right thing." Adrian stared at the wall. Anger gathered behind his calm expression. The documents showed that senior leadership had known about Alicia's complaint. They had watched Sloan retaliate and had done nothing. "Miss Morgan," Adrian said carefully, "would you be willing to tell your story officially and place it on the record?" Silence stretched across the line. Alicia's breathing was audible as she weighed the danger. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Sloan has powerful friends. If I speak again, she won't be allowed to hurt anyone else," Adrian said. "I will do everything in my power to protect you." Marissa met his eyes. Her expression reminded him that promises in cases like this carried enormous weight. "I'll consider it," Alicia said. "But Mr. Cross, she isn't the only one. There are others, a lot of others." The call ended. Adrian set down the phone and looked at Marissa. "We need witnesses who are willing to speak." "The documents matter," Marissa said, "but people connect with lived experience. They understand pain when they can hear it in someone's voice and see what it cost them. How many others do you think are out there?" "Dozens, perhaps more." Marissa removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. "But we have a serious problem. Conrad Hale has money, lawyers, investigators, and relationships throughout the business world. The moment he realizes what we're doing, he'll begin calling people. He'll offer settlements. He'll apply pressure. He may threaten anyone who refuses to stay quiet. Then we move quickly." "How quickly?" Adrian looked at the files covering the room. "Arrange private interviews as soon as possible. We need secure locations, independent recordings, and copies of every document before anyone can make them disappear." A private hotel meeting room became their safe place. Adrian selected the Ashton House because it stood near Crestwell headquarters, but felt completely separate from the company. There were no corporate logos, no glass walls, and no polished conference table. Only neutral carpet, simple chairs, and a wooden table. Marissa arrived carrying a leather briefcase and coffee. She placed a digital recorder on the table and opened several legal pads. Her movements were precise. The meeting would help determine whether they had a real case or only a collection of painful claims that Cresswell's lawyers could dismiss. Adrian entered wearing a dark gray suit instead of his usual casual clothes. He needed Alicia to see that he was prepared to act, not merely offer sympathy. Alicia Morgan entered cautiously. The old personnel files described a rising manager with leadership ability and outstanding performance reviews. The woman who walked through the door looked tired and worn down. Her black blazer remained professional but showed signs of long use. Her shoes were polished but modest. Everything about her suggested struggle, yet her eyes held determination. "Miss Morgan." Adrian stood and offered his hand. "Thank you for coming." Alicia shook it firmly. "Mr. Cross, I watched what she did to you on that plane. It made me sick, because I recognized her immediately. I knew that look. I knew that voice. Please sit. I understand this isn't easy." Alicia sat and removed a thick folder from her purse. "I brought copies of everything I saved." She spread email printouts, performance reviews, and meeting notes across the table. Each page revealed part of the same pattern: retaliation disguised as normal business decisions. Marissa leaned forward. "These emails show that Sloan blocked your promotion to regional director 3 separate times," Alicia said. "She told Human Resources that I wasn't leadership material. She said I had an attitude problem and couldn't perform under pressure." Adrian read over Marissa's shoulder. One email turned his stomach. Sloan had written directly to Conrad that Alicia was focusing too heavily on diversity concerns instead of what she called real work. She recommended replacing Alicia with someone who better reflected company values. "What happened after you filed your formal complaint?" Marissa asked. "Everything changed. My work was suddenly unacceptable. My reports contained errors no one could explain. My team meetings were canceled. Then they moved my office to the basement." "The basement?" Adrian asked. "A storage area beside the mailroom. No windows. The air conditioning barely worked. They called it a temporary space adjustment." Alicia gave a quiet, humorless laugh. "I stayed there until they fired me." Marissa continued taking notes. "Did Conrad's office contact you directly?" "His assistant called soon after I filed the complaint. She said Conrad wanted to handle the matter quietly to protect my reputation. She suggested that I withdraw the complaint and accept a transfer to another city." "You refused?" "Of course. It was a demotion disguised as an opportunity. The territory was smaller, the commission structure was lower, and there was no path forward." Alicia placed another document on the table. "After I refused, they started creating a paper trail." Adrian studied the performance reviews. Every earlier evaluation rated Alicia as outstanding or above expectations. The final evaluation, written shortly before her termination, suddenly listed failures, behavior problems, and concerns that had never appeared before. "This is fabricated," Adrian said. "They needed documentation to fire me without severance," Alicia replied. Sloan wrote the final review herself. She described incidents that never happened and claimed I had been disrespectful in meetings I never attended. "Did you consider legal action?" Marissa asked. "With what money? They fought my unemployment claim. I was struggling to pay rent." Alicia's voice tightened. "Conrad's office sent a message through my former supervisor. If I pursued a lawsuit, they would make sure I never worked in the industry again." The room fell silent. Adrian looked at the evidence covering the table and felt something shift inside him. This was no longer about an airplane confrontation or a viral recording. It was about power being used to crush people who had no resources to fight back. "Miss Morgan," Adrian said, "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "I owned most of this company when they destroyed your career. I should have known. I should have paid attention." Alicia studied him for a long moment. "Apologies don't pay medical bills, Mr. Cross. They don't repair a reputation." Adrian nodded. "You're right. So what are you going to do?" The question hung between them. Adrian felt the weight of every document on the table. Every silenced employee. Every career damaged to protect people who already possessed more power than they needed. "I'm going to fight," he said. "Not for revenge. For accountability. For the people who told the truth and paid the price. And for every employee who might otherwise become the next person forced into silence." Alicia leaned back and watched him carefully. You need to mean that. The moment they learn I'm speaking, they'll come after me again. Marissa's phone vibrated. She read the message and frowned. A contact inside Crestwell says someone has started asking questions about former employees. Adrian's expression darkened. They know. Across the city, Sloane sat in her corner office staring at a message from her assistant. Alicia Morgan had been seen entering the Ashton house with an unidentified man in a gray suit. Sloane's hands trembled as she called Conrad. Conrad, she said when he answered. Alicia is talking. The Crestwell boardroom felt different when Adrian returned with the evidence. Sunlight stretched across the polished table, casting long shadows while board members sat in uneasy silence. Adrian presented each document as carefully as a prosecutor laying out a case. Performance reviews that changed without explanation. Emails showing deliberate retaliation. Settlement agreements designed to silence employees instead of correcting misconduct. This is not about one confrontation on an airplane, Adrian said. It's about a culture that protects powerful people and punishes anyone brave enough to speak. Board member Vivian Shaw lifted Alicia's final performance review. These problems appear only after she filed a discrimination complaint. Every earlier review describes exceptional work, Marissa said from the chair beside Adrian. Then she speaks up, and suddenly she's incompetent and insubordinate. Another board member, Mateo Ruiz, shook his head. This is a clear retaliation pattern. Conrad sat at the head of the table. His usual confidence had begun to fracture. These are accusations from former employees who are angry about losing their jobs. We are hearing only one side. Are you calling Miss Morgan dishonest? Adrian asked. I'm saying that people who lose positions sometimes blame management instead of examining their own failures. Marissa slid a settlement agreement across the table. Then explain why Crestwell paid $40,000 to keep Miss Morgan quiet about claims you say were invented. Conrad's jaw tightened. Companies settle weak claims to avoid legal expenses. It doesn't mean... Stop. Vivian's voice cut through the room. Just stop, Conrad. We've heard enough carefully polished corporate language. Silence followed. Adrian sensed the mood shifting. Other board members began nodding. Mateo cleared his throat. I move for a formal ethics hearing and a complete investigation into these allegations. Seconded, Vivian said immediately. More hands rose. For the first time since Adrian opened the files, he felt a small measure of hope. The motion carries, Vivian announced. Miss Whitaker will appear and answer these charges. Every witness will be allowed to speak. Through the glass wall, Adrian could see Sloane at her desk. Her face had gone pale. Her phone continued vibrating, but she sat frozen, staring at the evidence spread across the boardroom table. After the board members left, Marissa gathered the documents while Adrian stood at the window. The city spread beneath them, filled with people working in offices like this one and trusting that their employers would protect them instead of betray them. The hearing could change everything, Adrian said quietly. Don't celebrate yet, Marissa replied. Desperate people rarely surrender with grace. What are you expecting? Conrad and Sloane have watched their power begin to dissolve. They won't enter that hearing and calmly accept responsibility. Adrian understood the warning, but hope remained. Camille had agreed to testify about the flight. Alicia had agreed to tell her story. Board members were finally listening instead of making excuses. Throughout the building, employees gathered in small groups and whispered about the activity on the executive floor. Someone had seen boxes of files carried into the boardroom. Someone else had heard raised voices behind closed doors. For many of them, justice no longer felt impossible. After the building emptied, Conrad remained alone in his corner office. City lights reflected against the windows as he opened a sealed cabinet hidden behind a bookshelf. Sloane appeared in the doorway. Is it time? She asked. Conrad reached for files he had hoped never to use. Close the door. Adrian arrived at headquarters well before the ethics hearing. The building was quiet and strangely ominous. His footsteps echoed through the marble lobby as he crossed toward the elevators. Marissa was waiting in the temporary office. Her laptop was open, and her face was grim. We have a problem. Adrian placed his coffee down and moved beside her. The screen displayed an error message where their organized evidence should have been. What happened? The digital files are gone. All of them. The server logs show that someone deleted everything with administrative credentials. Marissa searched folder after folder. Each one was empty. Emails, audio, internal memoranda, everything we uploaded. Adrian felt cold settle in his stomach. Who has access at that level? Information technology, security, and senior executives. Whose credentials were used? Conrad Hales. The desk phone rang. Marissa answered, listened, then handed it to Adrian. It's Alicia. Adrian took the receiver. Alicia? I can't testify. Her voice sounded shaken. I'm sorry. What happened? Someone left an envelope beneath my apartment door. It contained pictures of my daughter walking to school, her schedule, and the route she takes home. Alicia struggled to continue. The note said accidents can happen when parents make poor choices. Adrian gripped the phone. Did you call the police? What good would that do? These people destroyed my career once. Now they're threatening my child. I can't risk her safety. I'm sorry. I can't do it. The line went silent. Marissa was already trying another number. Camille isn't answering. They soon learned why. Adrian's assistant entered carrying a printed email from Atlantic Skies Airways. Adrian read it aloud. Flight attendant, Camille Brooks has been suspended pending a conduct review. The airline alleges unprofessional behavior and a violation of passenger privacy policies. Marissa closed her laptop with force. They're removing every witness. Adrian's phone began filling with news alerts. He opened the first story and felt his hands tremble. The headline described him as a billionaire owner, targeting an employee after a minor airplane dispute. The article presented him as unstable, vindictive, and dangerous. Leaked emails, carefully forged, supposedly showed him planning to destroy anyone who embarrassed him in public. Anonymous sources called him paranoid and increasingly unpredictable. The story portrayed Sloan as an innocent employee facing the anger of a powerful man's wounded pride. More reports appeared. Business networks questioned whether Adrian was fit to lead Crestwell. Marissa read the same pattern across her screen. This is coordinated. The stories were released together so the false version would reach everyone before we could respond. The intercom sounded. Mr. Cross, the board requests your immediate presence in the main conference room. Adrian entered to find the board already seated. Conrad stood at the head of the table wearing a grave, concerned expression. Adrian, Conrad said gently, we need to discuss troubling developments. You mean the lies you placed in the press? I mean serious questions about your judgment. Shareholders are demanding answers. The stock has fallen sharply, and confidence in leadership is deteriorating. Conrad spoke with almost fatherly concern. We're facing a crisis. Matteo shifted uncomfortably. Adrian, the allegations claim you used company resources to target employees for personal reasons. Those documents are false. Perhaps, Conrad said. But the loss of shareholder confidence is real. The board must decide whether changes are necessary to protect the company. Vivian, who had supported Adrian, now struggled to meet his eyes. The morality provision in your agreement requires a board review when executive conduct creates severe disruption. Adrian looked around the table. The courage he had seen earlier had been replaced by fear. Concern for stock value and reputation had overwhelmed their commitment to truth. You're removing me based on manufactured evidence. We're protecting Crestwell, Conrad said. You would do the same in our position. Adrian's phone vibrated with a legal notification. He opened it and saw that Sloan had filed a civil rights lawsuit against him and Crestwell International. The complaint accused him of discrimination, abuse of power, and deliberate harassment after what it called a minor misunderstanding on an airplane. Her lawyers had already distributed the filing to the press. Conrad offered a sympathetic smile. She has the right to defend herself through the legal system. I hope you understand the board's position. Adrian rose slowly. His chair scraped against the floor. Beyond the conference room windows, reporters were gathering outside the building. Camera crews prepared along the sidewalk. The ethics hearing is postponed, Conrad said. Under these circumstances, continuing would be irresponsible. Adrian walked toward the door while every person at the table watched him. Employees whispered as he passed through the hall. Some looked sympathetic. Others were too afraid even to acknowledge him. He entered the elevator knowing that people throughout the company had briefly believed justice was coming. Now they were watching the majority owner leave as though he were the one on trial. Reporters surrounded him the moment he stepped outside. Cameras flashed. Questions came from every direction about the lawsuit, the leaked emails, and his ability to lead the company. Far above the street, Conrad stood at his office window and watched Adrian disappear into the crowd. His reflection in the glass wore a faint smile. Marissa drove Adrian away from the chaos. He sat in the passenger seat staring at his hands while the city blurred beyond the window. "They had everything prepared," he said. "Every move." Marissa tightened her grip on the steering wheel. Conrad has been building this defense for a long time. The morality provision, the false emails, Sloane's lawsuit, the pressure on the board. It was coordinated. Alicia won't testify. Camille has been suspended. The digital evidence is gone. Exhaustion entered Adrian's voice. They destroyed everything. Not everything. Marissa turned away from the crowded streets. "We still have the truth. Truth doesn't help when people are too afraid to hear it." Adrian closed his eyes. The board had abandoned him almost immediately. "They're frightened," he said. "Stock prices, shareholder confidence, legal exposure. That's all they can see." Marissa pulled into the parking garage beneath her law office. The concrete walls gave them privacy from the media storm outside. "Adrian, look at me." He turned. Determination remained in her eyes. "Earlier in my career, I watched a chief executive steal retirement money from thousands of employees. The evidence was overwhelming. The board knew. The lawyers knew. Everyone knew. But he had money, influence, and powerful connections. He walked away wealthy while families lost the future they had worked for. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No. It's supposed to remind you why people keep fighting." Marissa leaned closer. Some battles cannot be won inside boardrooms or through quiet legal meetings. Sometimes the truth has to be taken directly to the people who are never supposed to see it. Adrian's phone rang from an unfamiliar number. Adrian Cross. "Mr. Cross, this is Camille Brooks." Her voice was quiet and cautious. "I'm calling from a private area at the airport." Adrian sat upright. "Camille, I heard about the suspension. I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. Listen carefully. There was another passenger on our flight. His name is Julian Mercer. He's a cybersecurity attorney." Marissa leaned closer. Julian preserved the original recordings from the plane. Not only the video, he has full audio, original file information, and complete evidence showing when and how everything was recorded. Adrian's heartbeat quickened. Conrad's people are claiming the footage was altered. Julian expected powerful people to change the story. He created secure copies before the recording spread publicly. Camille paused. "But there is more." "What else?" "After the flight," Julian continued recording while he waited near baggage claim. He captured Sloane speaking with Conrad. They believed no one could hear them. Marissa reached for Adrian's arm. "They discussed intimidating witnesses," Camille said. "Conrad spoke about getting me suspended and threatening Alicia. They were planning the cover-up before anyone left the airport." Adrian's thoughts raced. The forged documents, the pressure on the board, the lawsuit, and every attack on the witnesses had been part of a plan. "Can you give me Julian's contact information? He's already expecting your call. He wants to help, but he's concerned about Conrad's relationships with the media and law enforcement." Marissa opened her phone and began taking notes. "We need a place Conrad can't control, somewhere public, with investors and journalists present. A setting where the evidence cannot be buried behind closed doors." Adrian looked at her as an idea took shape. He reached into his jacket and removed an elegant black invitation with gold lettering. It was for the Crestwell International Annual Shareholder Gala at the Grand Meridian Hotel. "Every board member and major shareholder will be there," Marissa said. "The financial press will be present. Conrad plans to announce a leadership transition," Adrian replied. "He intends to remove me publicly in front of everyone whose opinion matters to him." Camille's voice came through the speaker. "Whatever you're planning, be careful. These people have already shown how far they'll go to protect themselves." Adrian studied the invitation. Conrad wanted a public stage for Adrian's downfall. Adrian was going to use that same stage to reveal the truth. Adrian's hotel suite became a command center. Sunlight passed through tall windows and reflected across polished floors and dark wooden furniture. Breakfast dishes had been cleared away, but the large table remained crowded with laptops, legal folders, printed emails, financial statements, and handwritten notes. Coffee sat untouched beside stacks of evidence. Marissa occupied one side of the table with her reading glasses low on her nose. She reviewed corporate bylaws and contract language line by line. The expensive suite no longer felt like a place of rest. It had become the center of a fight for control of Crestwell International. Adrian stood near the windows with his sleeves rolled up, looking down at the streets far below. He had barely rested. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw Sloane glaring across the airplane aisle and raising her hand in contempt while passengers recorded the humiliation. Yet her cruelty wasn't what disturbed him most. What cut deeper was the speed with which people inside his own company had rushed to protect her. Executives had ignored years of complaints, then attacked witnesses the moment the truth threatened their positions. A knock sounded at the door. Marissa opened it for Julian Mercer, who entered carrying a slim black briefcase. Julian moved with the calm precision of a man trained to notice details. Even the way he placed the case on the table seemed deliberate. Adrian stepped forward and shook his hand. "Thank you for preserving the truth." Julian nodded. "I've watched powerful people rewrite events when ordinary people don't have the resources to fight back. I wasn't going to let that happen here." He unlocked the briefcase and removed a sealed external drive, protected inside a hardened storage case. He placed it carefully on the table. "Everything from the flight is here," Julian explained. "Original video, original audio, file information, passenger recordings, enhanced sound files, and documentation showing how each item was collected and preserved. Conrad's lawyers won't be able to dismiss this as selective editing." Marissa leaned closer. "How strong is it legally?" "Extremely strong. I followed federal cybersecurity evidence procedures from the moment I realized these recordings could matter. Every file was copied to 3 independent encrypted servers. The digital records confirm authenticity down to the second." Adrian exhaled slowly. Conrad had manipulated reporters, board members, and shareholders with carefully prepared lies. At last, they possessed evidence that could not be explained away. Another knock interrupted them. Camille Brooks entered after Marissa opened the door. She looked exhausted. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes, but determination remained in her posture. Her airline uniform had been replaced by jeans and a navy sweater. Without the uniform, she looked less like a flight attendant and more like an ordinary woman who had been pulled into a conflict she never asked to join. Adrian offered her a seat. "How are you holding up?" Camille gave a quiet laugh with no humor in it. "I'm angry." She rubbed her hands together. "My supervisor called. They're recommending that I be dismissed for failing to maintain passenger safety standards. I gave that airline the best years of my working life. My reviews were excellent, and I had never received a formal complaint. Now they're willing to throw me away to protect Sloane Whitaker." The bitterness in her voice filled the room. Marissa handed her a small digital recorder. "Tell us everything. Begin when Sloane saw Adrian's boarding pass. Then describe every conversation you've had with airline management since the flight." Camille pressed the record button. At first, she spoke carefully, describing Sloane's immediate hostility, the insults, the demands that Adrian be moved, and the threats against the crew. She explained how the confrontation escalated until Sloane raised her middle finger directly in Adrian's face while the cabin watched in disbelief. As Camille continued, her voice became steadier. "After the flight, management wanted me to describe it as confusion over seating. They said the public had exaggerated the situation. They asked me to suggest that both passengers had contributed to the conflict. When I refused to change what happened, they suspended me." Adrian felt anger tightening in his chest. The people involved treated careers and livelihoods as casually as paperwork. Before anyone could respond, another knock came from the door. Alicia Morgan entered holding a thick folder against her chest. Her eyes moved around the suite as though she expected Conrad's people to appear at any moment. Even after leaving Crestwell, fear had remained part of her daily life. "I brought every copy I have," Alicia said as she sat. "Performance reviews from before and after my complaint, emails, human resources reports, internal messages Sloane never expected anyone else to see." She pushed the folder toward Marissa. As Marissa examined the documents, her expression hardened. "This establishes a clear pattern of retaliation." Alicia pointed to a highlighted email. "That's where Sloane called me a troublemaker. She told senior managers that I was unstable and difficult. After that, promotions disappeared. Meetings were canceled. People avoided me in the hallway as though speaking to me might damage their own careers." Her voice cracked. "They dismantled my reputation one small piece at a time." Adrian studied her. "You stayed silent for a long period. Why come forward now?" Alicia met his eyes. Because you're the first person with enough power to fight them. And because if I stay quiet, they'll do the same thing to someone else. Silence settled across the suite. Marissa began calling trusted federal contacts in regulatory and law enforcement agencies. Her side of each conversation was calm and exact. Adrian heard phrases such as witness intimidation, obstruction, retaliation, conspiracy, and securities fraud. When the calls were complete, Marissa faced the group. Federal investigators have already been examining Crestwell. They suspected Conrad Hale of financial misconduct. What we've gathered gives them a basis to act. Julian sealed the drives into evidence bags. Camille and Alicia exchanged nervous looks. Are we notifying the board? Marissa asked. Adrian shook his head. No. Conrad expects me to follow the same corporate process he controls. He expects formal complaints, private hearings, delays, negotiations, and closed-door decisions while he manipulates the people involved. Adrian placed both hands on the table and looked at everyone. He plans to remove me publicly in front of shareholders, executives, and cameras. We'll answer him in the same room, with evidence no one can hide. He closed the final folder. They chose the public stage. That's where the truth will meet them. The Crestwell International Shareholder Gala filled the Grand Meridian Hotel ballroom with wealth, influence, and carefully maintained appearances. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across marble columns, while investors, executives, and board members gathered beneath tall windows overlooking the city park. Camera crews positioned themselves around the room. Financial reporters checked microphones and reviewed notes. Conrad Hale stood near the raised stage, adjusting his silver tie while speaking with an assistant. His black suit was perfectly tailored. He carried himself as though his control of Crestwell had already become permanent. Sloane Whitaker remained near the front of the room in a crimson dress. Her hair was flawless, her makeup precise, and her confident smile suggested that the airplane confrontation belonged to a past she had already defeated. She laughed with board members and accepted greetings as though she had won. The event coordinator asked everyone to take their seats for a special presentation. The crowd settled into elegant chairs facing the stage. Conrad climbed the steps with practiced ease and waited behind the podium for silence. Good evening, shareholders and friends of Crestwell International. This gathering marks an important moment in our company's future. Polite applause moved through the ballroom. Sloane clapped from near the front, her eyes bright with expectation. Conrad continued. Serious concerns have emerged regarding leadership decisions that may threaten shareholder confidence and company stability. Several board members nodded solemnly. Conrad had spent days preparing them for this moment. Recent events suggest a pattern of impulsive and emotional decision-making that places personal grievances above responsible business judgment. Our reputation, our employees, and our investors require steady leadership. Cameras focused on him. Reporters wrote rapidly. The board has therefore asked me to address questions about majority ownership and the responsibility it carries toward every stakeholder. The ballroom grew quieter. Sloane's smile widened. The removal of Adrian Cross was about to begin. Before we proceed with the leadership restructuring vote, Conrad said, we must consider. The ballroom doors opened. The sound echoed across the marble floor. Adrian Cross entered in a dark navy suit, walking with quiet confidence. Marissa Grant moved beside him carrying a leather briefcase. Camille Brooks followed in a simple black dress. Alicia Morgan walked with Julian Mercer, both determined despite the tension in their faces. The crowd turned. Whispers traveled through the room as investors recognized people from the recent news reports. Sloane's smile faded. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. Conrad's composure wavered for only a moment. Mr. Cross, this is a private shareholder event. Please take your seat so we can continue. Adrian stopped before the stage. I'm requesting a few minutes before any vote takes place. That isn't part of the agenda, Conrad replied. Please sit down. Board member Evelyn Hart stood from the front row. As majority owner, Mr. Cross has the right to address the shareholders. This is highly irregular, Conrad said. Let him speak, another board member called. Several voices joined in agreement. Conrad had been trapped by the corporate procedures he expected to use against Adrian. Sloane's face went pale when she saw Camille and Alicia. Adrian climbed the stage without waiting for Conrad's permission. Marissa handed him a small remote as he approached the podium. Thank you, Adrian said into the microphone. What you're about to see will explain why this vote cannot proceed. He raised the remote. Conrad stepped forward. This is completely out of order. The large screens around the ballroom flashed white, then displayed sharp video from the airplane cabin. Passengers appeared in first class as Adrian walked down the aisle with his duffel bag. Sloane sat by the window and watched him approach with visible contempt. The ballroom fell silent. Sloane's recorded voice filled the room. "No, absolutely not. I'm not sitting next to him." The footage continued. Her anger rose. Her insults echoed beneath the chandeliers while hundreds of people watched without speaking. Then came the moment that caused several guests to gasp. On the screen, Sloane raised her hand directly toward Adrian's face and extended her middle finger. Every expression was visible. Every word was clear. The ballroom remained frozen as the recording showed her questioning Adrian's right to sit in first class, mocking his clothes, and demanding that he be removed. The same video also captured Adrian's restraint. He never shouted, threatened, or insulted her. Even when she humiliated him publicly, he remained composed. When the video ended, Adrian turned toward Julian, who connected his laptop to the projection system. "What you witnessed occurred on the flight," Adrian said. "What you're about to hear was recorded after we landed." A new audio file began playing through the ballroom speakers. The voices were immediately recognizable. Sloane spoke first. "Conrad, we have a problem. The man I forced out of the seat is Adrian Cross." Conrad's response followed. "How bad was it?" "Very bad. There is video." "Then listen carefully. We have to move before it spreads. First, discredit the witnesses. The flight attendant who helped him needs to be suspended. Find a reason. Any reason. What if former employees start speaking? Then we shut them down. Hard. What about Alicia? She's stayed quiet. If she talks, we destroy her reputation completely. Make sure she understands that her family could also face consequences." A shocked murmur swept through the ballroom. Investors rose from their chairs. Board members stared at Conrad in disbelief. Julian changed the display. Financial records, settlement agreements, and internal emails appeared on the screens. These records show 17 discrimination settlements connected to complaints against Miss Whitaker, Adrian said. Each one was buried by Mr. Hale to protect the company's image and his own position. The documents revealed company money, used to silence victims, promotions awarded despite repeated complaints, payments hidden from board oversight, and ethics reports altered to conceal what had happened. Evelyn Hart stood. "Conrad, are these records genuine?" "They are being taken out of context," Conrad said. "You don't understand the legal strategy behind $47,000 to silence an employee, after Miss Whitaker described her as too ethnic for client meetings," Adrian read from the screen. $62,000 paid after another employee was denied promotion because Miss Whitaker said clients preferred working with real Americans. Angry voices erupted across the room. Investors demanded answers. Board members moved away from Conrad. Executives who had stood beside him moments earlier now watched with disgust. "This is character assassination," Conrad shouted into the microphone, but the crowd drowned him out. Marissa stepped forward and handed Adrian a sealed envelope. "Federal investigators have received copies of all evidence," Adrian announced. "That includes proof of witness intimidation, financial fraud, retaliation, and conspiracy to obstruct an investigation." As he spoke, 3 federal agents entered through the main ballroom doors. They moved directly toward the stage while the crowd opened a path. Conrad saw them and turned toward a side exit, but another agent was already waiting there. "Conrad Hale," the lead agent said, "you are under arrest on allegations involving conspiracy, witness tampering, and financial fraud." The ballroom watched in stunned silence as handcuffs closed around Conrad's wrists. His tailored suit, powerful title, and carefully controlled image could no longer protect him. Cameras captured every moment as agents escorted him away. With Conrad gone, attention shifted to Sloane. She stood alone near the front tables. The red dress that had made her look powerful now made her impossible to overlook. Her confidence had vanished. She searched the room for support. Board members avoided her eyes. Executives who had worked beside her for years suddenly became absorbed in their phones. At last, she walked toward the stage. "Adrian," she called. Her voice trembled. "I need to apologize." The microphone carried her words through the ballroom. What happened on the plane was wrong. I was under pressure. I wasn't thinking clearly. I never meant the things I said. She looked toward the cameras, then back at Adrian. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. Can we speak privately? Can we find a way to work this out? Adrian looked down from the stage. His expression was calm, but his answer carried the truth she had avoided since the flight. You weren't sorry when you believed I had no power. You're sorry because you discovered I mattered to people you wanted to impress. The ballroom became silent again. Adrian continued, his voice steady. But every person matters, Miss Whitaker. That was the lesson you refused to understand. In the period that followed, the executive floor of Crestwell International changed completely. The heavy doors that had hidden decisions were removed. Glass walls opened the offices where leaders worked, and employees were invited to observe how major policies were discussed. Adrian stood in the main conference room before employees, board members, and reporters. The same screens that had exposed Sloan now displayed Crestwell's new structure. Effective immediately, Sloan Whitaker's employment with Crestwell International is terminated, Adrian announced. Her benefits, stock options, and severance have been revoked under the terms governing serious misconduct. Employees near the back applauded. Others simply smiled, relieved that they no longer needed to hide their feelings. Conrad Hale has been permanently removed from every role within Crestwell. His authority is dissolved, and the board has voted unanimously to make that decision final, subject to the outcome of the federal proceedings. Adrian spoke without anger or satisfaction. He delivered the facts with the same calm authority he had shown on the plane. More importantly, we are changing the systems that allowed this to continue. The screens displayed new policies. Each one reflected a lesson learned from years of hidden harm. Every discrimination complaint will now be handled by an independent firm instead of internal human resources. Any employee who reports misconduct will receive immediate legal protection and cannot be punished, demoted, isolated, or dismissed for speaking honestly. Settlement agreements will no longer contain silence provisions designed to protect the company at the expense of the harmed employee. Marissa, now appointed as Crestwell's general counsel, stepped forward with a folder. We've also created a compensation fund, she said. Every employee harmed under the previous system will be eligible for financial restoration, even when an earlier settlement was signed. Emotion moved through the room. Some employees wiped their eyes. Others sat straighter, as though a weight had finally lifted from their shoulders. Alicia Morgan, Adrian called. Alicia rose slowly from the middle of the crowd. She wore a navy business suit and carried herself with a confidence that had once been taken from her. Miss Morgan has been reinstated to her previous management level with full back pay, restored benefits, and renewed health coverage. She will also lead our employee advocacy department, making certain that no one else faces what she endured. The applause became thunderous. Tears filled Alicia's eyes, but she smiled as employees welcomed her back into a company that had finally decided to protect its people. Camille Brooks, Adrian continued. Heads turned toward Camille near the front. She stood with the composed grace that had served her throughout her career in the air. Miss Brooks chose truth over personal safety when that choice carried real consequences. Crestwell is honored to offer her the position of Corporate Ethics Director. Her responsibility will be to make sure employees always have a voice, and that every voice is heard with dignity. Camille accepted with a small nod. Her smile showed gratitude, but also determination. These changes are more than policies, Adrian said. They are promises. Crestwell will never again be a place where power protects cruelty, or where telling the truth costs someone a livelihood. After the meeting, Adrian remained at work, signing the documents that made each commitment official. Every signature represented a person who would no longer face the same isolation Alicia had endured. Later, Adrian returned to Los Angeles International Airport for another cross-country flight. He wore the same simple style that had triggered Sloan's contempt. Dark jeans, a comfortable sweater, and the worn duffel bag over his shoulder. As he walked toward his seat, several passengers recognized him from the news. Most were polite enough not to stare. A middle-aged businessman in the aisle seat stood as Adrian approached. Mr. Cross, I recognize you. I have the window seat, but I'd be glad to switch if you'd prefer more space. After everything that happened, I thought. His voice faded awkwardly. The offer was sincere. He wanted to show kindness, perhaps to balance some small part of the cruelty Adrian had experienced. Adrian smiled. "There's no need." He settled into the seat beside the nervous passenger. "This time, we can simply travel as human beings." That was the real truth behind everything that happened. Sloane's greatest mistake wasn't that she insulted a wealthy owner. It was that she believed respect should depend on wealth, clothing, status, or influence. Her apology came only after she discovered that Adrian had power over her career. Before that discovery, she felt no responsibility for the pain she caused. Adrian's strength didn't come from revealing his ownership or watching people lose their positions. It came from refusing to become cruel in return. He stayed calm when he was humiliated, listened when others described their suffering, and used his authority to repair a system instead of merely punishing one person. Alicia's courage reminds us that speaking the truth can be frightening, especially when powerful people have taught us that silence is safer. Camille's choice shows that integrity often appears in ordinary moments, when no audience promises applause and no reward is guaranteed. Marissa and Julian demonstrate that justice needs more than good intentions. It needs preparation, evidence, patience, and people willing to protect facts when others try to rewrite them. The story also reminds us that forgiveness and accountability are not opposites. A person can let go of hatred without pretending that harmful behavior had no consequences. Real accountability creates a chance for change. It protects future victims, repairs what can be repaired, and asks everyone involved to take responsibility for the choices they made. Most of us may never control a large company or stand before a ballroom filled with cameras. Still, every day gives us smaller choices. We choose how to speak to a stranger. We choose whether to judge someone by appearance. We choose whether to stay silent when another person is treated unfairly. We choose whether our power, however small, becomes a shield for others or a weapon against them. Kindness isn't weakness. Calmness isn't surrender. And dignity doesn't belong only to people with titles, money, or influence. Every human being carries a story we cannot see. Every person deserves basic respect before we know their name, their position, or what they can do for us. The safest and most meaningful way to live is simple. Treat people well when there is nothing to gain. Tell the truth, even when it is uncomfortable. Accept responsibility when your choices cause harm. Offer forgiveness where it can heal, but never confuse forgiveness with permission for cruelty to continue. A good life is not measured only by success. It is measured by the dignity we protect, the courage we show, and the kindness we choose when nobody can force us to choose it. There is another lesson hidden in the way the people around Sloane responded. Some passengers looked away at first. Others watched in silence until the cruelty became impossible to ignore. One man chose to record what was happening, and Camille chose to stand between Adrian and the person attacking him. Their actions mattered because unfair treatment often survives through the belief that nobody will challenge it. Standing up for someone doesn't always require a dramatic speech. Sometimes it means calmly saying that a comment is wrong. Sometimes it means documenting what happened, supporting a colleague who is afraid, or refusing to repeat a convenient lie. Small acts of courage can protect a person's dignity and can also prevent a harmful situation from being erased later. At the same time, this story asks us to think carefully about the difference between an honest apology and an apology made only to escape consequences. Sloane's first apology focused on Adrian's identity. She was sorry after learning he owned the company, not because she suddenly understood the harm she had caused. A sincere apology begins differently. It names the behavior without excuses. It recognizes the pain inflicted on another person. It accepts that trust may not return immediately, and it shows change through consistent action rather than urgent promises. Responsibility also belongs to the people who build and maintain systems. Conrad didn't create every cruel decision himself, but he protected those decisions because silence seemed profitable. He treated reputation as more important than truth. That choice allowed individual prejudice to become an organizational pattern. A healthy workplace cannot depend on the hope that every powerful person will always behave well. It needs fair rules, independent review, protection for people who report misconduct, and leaders who understand that short-term embarrassment is less damaging than long-term corruption. When an institution punishes honesty, people eventually stop reporting problems. The silence may look peaceful from the outside, but underneath it, trust is disappearing. Adrian also had to accept his own share of responsibility. He didn't commit the abuse, yet he acknowledged that his distance from daily operations allowed it to continue unnoticed. That admission made his leadership stronger, not weaker. Real leaders don't protect their image by pretending they never missed anything. They ask what they failed to see, listen to people who paid the cost, and use what they learned to build something safer. That is an important lesson for families, workplaces, friendships, and communities. We don't have to carry blame for every wrong around us, but we do have a responsibility to respond when the truth reaches us. We can become defensive, protect our comfort, and search for reasons to dismiss the person speaking. Or we can listen with humility and ask what repair is possible. Alicia's restoration was meaningful because it involved more than kind words. Her position, income, benefits, and professional standing had been taken from her. Repair required practical action. This reminds us that compassion is most powerful when it becomes something real. A promise matters more when it is followed by protection. An apology matters more when it is followed by changed behavior. Concern matters more when it is followed by help. Camille's experience also shows why people who tell the truth need support. Courage doesn't erase fear. A person may do the right thing and still worry about losing income, reputation, or security. We shouldn't praise people for speaking up and then leave them alone to face the consequences. Gratitude should become protection, legal support, fair treatment, and a community that refuses to let them be isolated. Julian understood that memory can be challenged and stories can be manipulated. By preserving the original evidence, he protected more than a video. He protected the ability of others to know what truly happened. In everyday life, we may not need encrypted servers or legal records, but we can still value accuracy. We can resist spreading rumors, check what we know before making accusations, and avoid changing a story simply because the truth is inconvenient. The passengers on the second flight offered another quiet lesson. The businessman tried to show kindness because he recognized Adrian from the news. Adrian appreciated the gesture but didn't ask for special treatment. He wanted something simpler and more important. He wanted to be treated as a human being. That desire belongs to everyone. People shouldn't need fame before others become polite. They shouldn't need wealth before their pain is believed. They shouldn't need authority before someone clears the seat they paid for, listens to their complaint, or speaks to them with basic decency. We also need to remember that people are capable of change, but change requires honesty. Consequences do not automatically close the door to growth. They can become the moment a person finally sees what their choices have created. Whether Sloane chooses to learn from what happened is left to her. No one can force genuine remorse, but accountability gives her the opportunity to face the truth instead of continuing to hide behind power. Forgiveness, when it comes, is personal. It cannot be demanded by the person who caused the harm. It cannot be used to rush someone past pain or to avoid making things right. Forgiveness may bring peace to the person who is hurt, but accountability protects everyone who could be hurt next. Both can exist with compassion. The deepest lesson is that character is revealed in moments when we think the other person cannot affect our life. Sloane behaved one way when she believed Adrian was powerless, and another way when she learned he controlled her career. That contrast revealed more than any polished speech or professional title could. The way we treat people who can do nothing for us says more about our values than the way we treat people whose approval we need. So when life places someone unfamiliar in front of us, we can pause before making assumptions. We can remember that clothing doesn't reveal character, that a job title doesn't measure worth, and that quietness should never be mistaken for weakness. We can choose curiosity instead of judgment, patience instead of contempt, and respect before we know the whole story. Those choices may appear small, but they shape the kind of person we become. Repeated kindness builds trust. Repeated honesty builds courage. Repeated responsibility builds a life that doesn't need to be defended with excuses. And when we make mistakes, as every person eventually does, we can respond without hiding. We can admit what happened, listen to the impact, repair what we can, and let the experience change the way we live. That is how a painful moment can become a second chance. not by erasing the past, but by allowing the truth to guide what comes next. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. 2 more stories have been selected for you, and I believe you'll enjoy them. Take care and have a wonderful day.